50 years ago, one of the greatest debut rock albums ever was released, and today we got a special episode for you. Exclusive interviews with the legendary singer and the legendary drummer from this band. They're actually in two legendary bands together. But in this conversation, there's some real revelations. First of all, the reason that this band was able to record their incredible debut album in 1974 was because the world's biggest rock band secretly broke up for a couple of weeks. Nobody knew this, so their manager told this band they could record in their studio. They recorded this classic album in just 7 days on a budget of only $1,800. It would capsize radio and rupture the charts, hitting #1, selling 5 million copies with 5 classic songs, including one that was so amazing they named the band after it. We got a scorcher for you today, coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember watching your favorite pop culture moments through the Viewmaster, remember those? You're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the big red button and click the bell so you always know when our latest interviews and videos come out. And also check us out on Patreon and our 80stees.com below. So it's time for another edition of our series, Revelations. This is my favorite, where legendary artists reveal secrets and stories behind their greatest songs and albums. You won't find it anywhere else. Today, we have a special interview celebrating the 50th anniversary of one of the greatest debut albums in rock history, Bad Company. We have the singer that every rock legend says is their favorite rock singer, including Robert Plant, Ann Wilson of Heart, and Freddie Mercury when he was alive. Talking about the greatest Rock and Roll Hall of Fame snub ever. And this is a sin that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame will never be able to repent of. I'm talking about Mr. Paul Rodgers. We also have legendary drummer Simon Kirke here. The two of them were in both Free and Bad Company together. Simon Kirke reveals a lesser-known revelation that because the biggest rock band of the 70s essentially broke up secretly, Bad Company was able to get into their studio and record that debut. Let's get into it and make sure to celebrate the music by listening to the album along with this commentary at this link right here or the link below. Here it is. I believe that All Right Now is truly one of the greatest riffs of all time. Paul Rodgers, that voice and everything about it, musically, it's just a perfect song.
So what happened was when we started out, even though we were young, God, the average age was only 19, we were kind of had a loping, medium tempo beat. You know, it was like you could nod your head to it, but you couldn't dance. And we came off stage one night and the applause had died down before we even left the stage. It was that desultory, you know. We were like, oh God. So we got back to the dressing room. We said, you know, fucking hell, guys, we need something with a bit of pep, a bit of zest, you know. And I believe it was Andy Fraser in this dressing room who started bopping around. All right now. He played good drums, but he was actually bopping on his body. All right now. We go, wow, that's all right. So that little seed was sown, and then him and Paul Rodgers, over the next couple of weeks, they worked on it.
So I said something simple like, all right now, you know, like that. I said, well, maybe that should be the chorus.
All right now, baby, all right. And every sound check, we do this, bah, bah, bah.
And so Andy took that away and he came back with bam, boom, bam. That's, you know, which is great for a big stadium, you know.
As soon as you played the first bar, I was like, whoa.
So I wrote the lyrics and I had to, okay, so it's all right now. What happened before then, you know? Well, there she stood in the street. What was she doing? Smart. You know, and all the lyrics just poured out.
She stood in the street, smiling. We had this huge worldwide hit. And suddenly we're playing different countries. We're going to Japan, Australia. and we're reveling in this wonderful, we'd only been together maybe 2 years, and we were rocking.
What do I remember about recording it? I remember we recorded it. There was 2 studios at Island Records. And so they recorded it, and they were happy with it. And I said, just give me one more time. And Chris Blackwell came in with a couple of beautiful girls. And I must admit, it influenced it influenced the performance a little bit. So
Now it's gonna trick me in love.
And I hear it today, 55 years later. I go, wow, yeah, that was a great song.
You actually put together a band after Free, short-lived, called Peace. Then you put together Bad Company with Mick Ralphs from Mott the Hoople on lead guitar, Simon Kirk on drums, and Boz from King Crimson on bass. Just a phenomenal band.
So it was me and Paul Rodgers and Mick Ralphs, and we were jamming in Paul's cottage. We had broken up Free because it had become this just trail of tears, and we were just rocking. We were playing all sorts of covers, and then after the first session we all sat around having a cup of tea and said, I think we got something here. Before we actually auditioned Boz, we were sat in Paul's cottage, and he said, look, we need a really, really good manager. Who's the biggest band in the world right now? Led Zeppelin. Who's their manager? Peter Grant. And typical Paul Rodgers, take the bull by the horns. He called up Peter Grant and said, look, we've got a great band together. And Peter says, I know. I've already heard about it. What? How the you know about that? He said, I'll come and see you guys next week. And we were playing and waiting for Peter to arrive at 2 o'clock, as he said. 3 o'clock came, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Where is he? And he finally walked in, this big guy. As you know about him, he used to be a wrestler. And we said, oh, Peter, sit down, we'll play the set. And he said, no, don't worry, I've heard it. What do you mean? He said, I knew you'd be nervous. So I've been sitting in my car, in the car park outside, listening to you through the open window. Smart. And he said, I think you sound great. And then he dropped this bombshell. He said, look, Zeppelin are my boys, as he called them. We're putting together a record label, and we'd like you to be the first band on it. This is even without a regular bass player. He'd heard what he'd heard, and he loved it. And that was the beginning of a pretty amazing relationship with Peter.
Bad Company, talk about a kick-ass band.
We were able to make a really big noise with just the 4 of us. And I have to also mention that we had Swan Song Records, the launch of Led Zeppelin's record label. We had a launch in New York City. We had a launch in Los Angeles. It was catnip for a publicist. You had this band that came out of 3 well-loved English bands, colluding with Led Zeppelin on their brand new label. Oh, God, it was a perfect storm. So then the album went to #1 on Billboard, and it was just couldn't fail.
Well, you started with a bang. The Self-Titled Record is one of the best rock albums, one of the best debut albums. You score a top 5 smash hit right out of the chute with the first single, Can't Get Enough.
I can't get enough of your love.
I know that song was built off a guitar riff that Mick composed for a Mott the Hoople song.
Well, that was the straw that broke Mick's back, in that Ian Hunter said, no, I don't. I'm not crazy about that song. I don't want to do it. Paul's solo band was called Peace, and he was opening for Mott the Hoople, and they were going around England. Peace was opening for Mott. And during sound checks, and they get together in the dressing room, and Mick had this reel-to-reel. And Paul told me, he said, listen, this is a song that Ian Hunter won't do.
But anyway, we had a tuning room, and we used to tune our guitars in this room. So there was amps in there and guitars. and you'd go in and tune. So I'd often meet Mick back there, and he played me some songs. And I said, I guess you guys are going to use that song. It was Can't Get Enough of Your Love.
But it sort of swung along, and Paul started singing along with it. And Mick went, oh, my God. Well, I take whatever I want.
Take whatever I want, and baby.
So we started a conversation, and that developed into us becoming a songwriting team, which then led to the band Bad Company, which is the way it often starts, I do think. You know, basically it's the songs.
And just anything that Paul would sing on instantly brought it to life, you know, and that was it for Mick, yeah.
You know what I'm saying, baby?
One of the greatest rock vocalists ever, you know, Paul Rodgers.
No question.
I can't get enough of your love. I can't get enough.
There's a couple of places in Can't Get Enough where right towards the end, Paul goes, this one.
This one.
Because we were spread all over the house. We weren't in one room looking at each other where you can go, all right, now. And I think we cut out for sake this one because it kept going on and on. We were enjoying playing it so much, it kept going round and round. And Paul was saying, all right, this one. Because we were in this Headley Grange, this famous manor house that Led Zeppelin had taken over. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful time to be around.
I can't get enough of your love. I can't get enough.
I can say honestly with my hand on my heart that was the beginning of the happiest few years of my life, because suddenly Free was in the rearview mirror, you know, with all the angst and the addiction and all the tragedy and the cancelled tours and wondering if what costs would walk through the door tonight, you know. It was horrible. And suddenly I'm playing with this great guitarist, clear-eyed, you know, we smoke a bit of dope, we have a beer and occasionally whatever, nothing terrible. Rogers was happy, and a happy Rogers is the joy to be working with. You know, it was just a wonderful time. And I only found out relatively recently when Peter Grant called up Paul Rodgers and said, look, John Paul Jones, bass player, as you know, was Zeppelin, and he's got the flu, and they've suspended their recording in Headley Grange. So do you want to record your album? Get down there now. And by the way, we did everything in a week. We did the tracking, the basic tracks and mixing in 7 days. And what had happened was John Paul Jones had left Led Zeppelin. He was fed up and the carousing and the drinking, and he was a very clean-cut young man, JPJ, and he wanted to be a choir master in Canterbury Cathedral. And so he just walked out, and Zeppelin said, and they all went home. And that's when Peter called up Paul and said, hey, you know.
We went straight in, we put everything we had down, and we made the first Bad Company album in that time. I mean, Led Zeppelin were fantastically supportive of us, and Peter Grant was too. We had the run of the whole house. So to give us this time was really important to us.
Well, Bad Company, the song, you're one of only just a few bands in the history of rock that has a song the same name as the band. What came first?
I remember when I went down to see Paul in his cottage, and he just got this wonderful big grand piano, which took up most of the ground floor of his little cottage, and he was tinkling around with this riff, bam, bam, bam. But he came out with this company. He said, "Listen to this side, always on the run." And I thought, "Wow, that's nice." He said, "But I've got nothing else."
Always on the run.
So I sort of sat around and said, well, Destiny is the rising sun. Ooh, that's good. So we sat around and we had a little drink and whatever, and I think we finished the song in about 20 minutes. Now, I truly believe that was the first the first stone in the wall of Bad Company, as it were. Because what happened a couple of weeks later, and I don't know if this was a coincidence or what, but Paul came back from Guildford, and he'd been walking down the high street, Main Street, and there was a billboard advertising a movie called Bad Company.
I saw this advertising for the first movie called Bad Company, and I thought, wow, that's fantastic. I'm going to write a song called Bad Company. So I sat down at the piano and started to work on that.
And I remember to this day him coming back and saying, I think I found the name for the band, Bad Company. I went, oh, that's great.
Whatever it is you do, I went to a different place. I was in the Wild West. and then Kirky came around and threw a few lines in for me, which was really nice. And we had Bad Company. And then I called Mick up and said, Bad Company. And he went, that's it, the name of the band.
Bad company, and I can deny.
Also, I heard that it came from your childhood days as well. You saw a book.
Well, yes. Well, actually, it did trigger a memory, because the last time I'd seen those two words together, Bad Company, was in, there was my best friend Peter Smith had this Victoriana book that no one ever read, right? And I flicked through it one time, and it had these pictures. This was how you'd be good, right? And so there was a picture of this, I guess you'd call him a Victorian punk. And there was a little, like, choir boy looking type of kid with his hands behind his back, looking up at him like this, like worshipping. And it said, beware of bad company, you know? And I just remembered that. And the two things combined, I thought, oh, yeah, I've got to write. That's why I thought, must write a song called Bad Company.
Well, it's interesting to come out as a brand new band with its own kind of theme song, you know?
I guess it worked that way for us, although it wasn't really planned. It's just the way the cards fell, you know.
Paul said when he recorded the vocal, you guys did it in a different way than most people do it. Tell me about that.
Well, Paul did most of the vocals, but in particular, Bad Company, he did it on the lawn about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. You got to remember, we were still in like 24, 25 years old, but Paul always had this, you know, these kind of fairly outlandish ideas. And he had this idea about, I want to do the vocal on the lawn.
By the time we got it all set up, it was like, you know, you had to walk across the field with cow shit in it. And
you know, probably freezing his little ass off.
You know, you had to get into the groove and like, okay, give me the music. Let's go. You know, let's forget all that stuff setting up. Let's get the music, you know. And you had to put yourself into the frame of mind that would deliver the song, really, basically. Yeah.
It's like a method actor. You were a method singer. You were a method singer out there, vocals.
But I think he did it in 2 takes. I mean, I you know, we did it. He always did 2 takes, but there was no necessity because he always pretty much nailed it on the first.
There was a little wind that blew at the end, like, went right across the mic. And I thought, and I'll use that straight away, you know. Well, there's a cold wind blowing. Yeah.
And I remember, I'll never forget, every time Paul would start back on the piano when we're playing arenas and whatever. And that, wow, you know, that growing tidal wave of applause would greet those first few chords. Gives me the shivers.
If You Needed Somebody was the first top 40 hit since Rock and Roll Fantasy, and it happens right when grunge is coming along and everything. And you guys have such a rich history of, yes, what you did in the 70s, but like I said, coming back in the 90s with a new singer, Brian Howe. What did you think when you had that hit? Were you kind of like, whoa, I never expected this?
I ride a Harley, and back in those days, in the 80s, I went on a big tour, and my Harley needed a tune-up. And the guy took me, he was working on my bike. He said, you know, that new singer of yours, he ain't Paul Rodgers, but it's still a good band. And I went, wow. that kind of put it in a nutshell. He begrudgingly still liked the new version of Bad Company, but he said, but no one is going to touch Paul Rodgers, you know. And that's cool. It was all right. I just want to say that sometimes the music and the legacy of the music overrides the personnel. I don't regret a lot in Bad Company out of all the 50 years now since the first album. A couple of things I regret: my addiction, that's part of my history. I regret the way that it ended with Brian, because we parted on very bad terms. But that's about it, honestly, Adam. That's really about it.
It's so cool. Bad Company really is such a badass name for a band. Make sure to get their classic on vinyl or any other, or listen to it right here at this link or the link below. And leave us a comment about your memories about Bad Company and Free. Paul Rodgers as a singer. Again, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. How can you call it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame if Paul Rodgers isn't in it? I mean, arguably the greatest singer in history. It's just, it's BS. It's total BS. I could go on and on and on and on. Again, this is a sin that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame will never be able to repent for. You can never make good. You can never call yourself the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame if you don't have Paul Rodgers in it, or Bad Company for that matter. But make sure to do that. Leave us a comment. Let's have a great discussion. And until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.